From the moment we're born to the day we die, we're living a story in which we are the main characters. And during this time, we hear stories, watch stories, tell stories. In fact, we can't live without stories. They've become such an integral part of being human, of being alive. But how is it that stories have become such an important part of our society today? I'll start with the fact that stories have never emerged. They've always been. Every culture from generation to generation has found ways to tell stories and to preserve them, whether it be through paintings on cave walls, hieroglyphics on artifacts, or libraries full of manuscripts. And for these people, stories weren't merely just tales told for entertainment, but rather they were the foundation and building block of their society's ethical and moral values. The values discussed in these stories dictated what was considered right in the society you lived in. You act like this heroic character, and you're a good person in society. You act like this villain, and you're instantly despised. Many of you have probably heard of the Iliad, and if you haven't, it was an epic poem written by Homer depicting the tragedies of the Trojan War. Despite being a fictional story, when Homer first wrote the epic, it changed Greek culture. It became a prime subject for art and literature, but more significantly, it became a crucial building block for the Greek way of living. Every challenge and solution that the Iliad discussed became a blueprint for how Greek people should live their lives. Just like Achilles' perseverance, when faced with a challenge, you should never give up. Just like the king of Sparta, if something you love gets stolen, do whatever you need to get it back. Through the war conflicts, the Greeks learned the importance of treating others with respect, accepting apologies, and the importance of familial bonds. Through his stories, Homer created the perfect hero, the person everyone should strive to become and the person everyone indeed strives to be. Now, these are stories of the past, but what about stories of the present? Every time you watch a movie, you're watching a story. Every time you tell your friends about your day, you're telling a story. Every video game is a story. Newspapers, courts of law, sporting arenas, magazines, playgrounds, songs. There are stories everywhere. But the stories I'm going to be talking to you about today are those written with pen and paper, otherwise known as books. And I know many of you may only think that they're read in English classrooms, but I'm here to tell you that they can be so much more. In fact, one of the first book series I ever obsessed over as a child was Harry Potter. In fact, I devoured book after book. There wasn't anything anyone could tell me to make me put one of those books down. And so throughout 5th grade, I traveled hand in hand with Harry, Ron, and Hermione through a magical chess match, the Triwizard Tournament, flying cars, dragons, and so much more. I experienced the wizarding world like no other. But what touched me about these characters was that despite everything that they had been through, and despite everything that loomed on the horizon, they kept pushing and making the most of every moment. Even though the world had placed a boulder on Harry's shoulder, he didn't let it crush him, but turned it into a weapon to drive him. And so 6 years later, it isn't the details of the final battle or the exact 7 Horcruxes that I remember. It's the love, the perseverance, and the optimistic view about the world that each of the characters embodied throughout the book. Harry Potter taught 10-year-old me that despite anything that may come up in my path, and despite any challenges to my life that may occur, I just have to keep pushing and making the most of every moment. And eventually, all the hard work will pay off. If it took Harry, Ron, Hermione, and the Wizarding World 7 books to defeat Voldemort, I could have patience as well. It's these kind of morals that make stories so important to children today. Fairy tales and other children's books teach kids how to be creative and how to think outside of the box. But they're also kind of like a moral compass as well. Just like how we talked about the Iliad dictating correct behavior in ancient Greece, fairy tales and other children's stories teach kids how to behave in this world and what the right and wrong thing to do is. The message often comes out as good and evil. In The Little Red Riding Hood, after her actions lead to the death of her grandmother, she learns not to trust strangers blindly. In The Boy Who Cried Wolf, children learn that telling lies won't get you anywhere. And in The Ugly Duckling, children learn the importance of kindness and perspective. These are the kind of morals that children need to learn growing up. And there's so many more other children's books and fairy tales out there that teach kids about the world and how to deal with daily conflicts, including being in tune with their own emotions. In a way, every reader has a jar, And I'm a reader, so here's my jar. Every time I read a book, I put a bead in the jar. I can read about a journey into a magical kingdom, about sisterhood, about loneliness, about not fitting in, about a small little town named Cannery Row, about societal challenges, about the American dream, and so much more. And every book I read is a drop of wisdom, a bead that is added to my jar. And with each bead also comes a whole new experience. Some books can take me to the dunes of the Sahara Desert, on top of the Eiffel Tower, or even in the snowy mountains of Russia. I could Google what it's like to live in Europe and read all about that, but to experience European life firsthand without actually traveling 5,000 miles across the globe, that's amazing. I could Google what it's like to live during Shakespeare's time, or I could live through one of his characters in his plays. I can read about any country, any ethnicity during any period of time and experience that culture firsthand. Visiting a library is like finding the entire world in one building, and it's extraordinary. This variety of books helps us experience different situations without actually being in them. Day to day, we go from home, school, work, repeat, right? Maybe take a vacation to another country every now and then, but ultimately, we're still living inside our own little bubble. Reading about different places and cultures helps us step outside of this bubble and experience piece by piece the world around us. Many studies have even shown how reading can actually increase empathy, creativity, and decision-making skills as well. To start, when we read a book, we're going on this journey with the character. And as much as it may feel like we're on the sidelines watching this character, we're in fact attaching ourselves to this character's emotions and thoughts. That's why when we read, we laugh, we cry, we get frustrated. Many of us even yell at our books. In fact, in a study done in 2021, scientists found that when we read, we're actually simulating the same emotional states as the characters. That's why readers tend to be so much more empathetic and capable of recognizing others' emotions as well. This empathy helps us understand different perspectives too. Imagine getting a new pair of shoes. These are magical pair of shoes. Many of you have probably heard of Ratatouille, and if you haven't, a rat named Remy controls the chef's cooking by pulling out his hair under the chef's hat. In other words, Remy controls everything that the chef does. And so in the same way, these shoes control everything that you do. You go along and do whatever the shoes do for the day. You go to the beach, hike up a mountain, go roller skating, skydive, learn how to do flips, and so much more. And at the end of the day, you can take these shoes off and resume control of your own body. But you have this whole new set of experiences that you can now utilize day to day. That's what reading is like. You can be and do anything you want. There's a quote by George R.R. Martin, the author of Game of Thrones, which goes, "A reader lives 1,000 lives before he dies. The man who never reads lives only one." Every book we read, every life we live, helps us make the most of the one that we're living today. You can read about a character who just lost their friend or their parents and are struggling through life. You may read a book about a character reeling from heartbreak and struggling with loneliness. You may read a book about a character who, despite being different, persevered to accomplish your goal of being one of the best dragon riders. And from seeing these situations like death, heartbreak, and strength, we too learn lessons that we can then apply into our own lives when we're faced with similar challenges. So the next time you come across free time, I encourage you to pick up a book. Whatever genre you like, whether it be the Iliad, Harry Potter, or Little Red Riding Hood, something else that piqued your interest, just pick up a story and read it from cover to cover. Digest every word written on that page. Dive into that adventure. Let those shoes take you on an unforgettable journey. Fill your jar up with beads on beads, because I promise you, it's worth it. I want to leave you with one final quote by transcendentalist Ralph Waldo Emerson. He said, "I cannot remember the books I've read any more than the meals I've eaten. Even so, they have made me." Thank you.